Okay, welcome everyone, and we welcome our speaker for today's webinar, Dr. Adewale Awoyemi, the newest doctor in town. He's a Nigerian conservation biologist with expertise in urban ecology, ornithology, and environmental conservation. Dr. Awoyemi holds a PhD in biology from Sobresaliente Cum Laude. I hope I pronounced that right, from the University of Granada in Spain, and an MSc in conservation biology with distinction from the AP Leventis Ornithological Research Institute in Nigeria, popularly known as APLORI. And this is affiliated with the University of Jos. His research focuses on urban ecology, biodiversity conservation, and restoration ecology with impactful papers in reputable journals, including Ecological Indicators, Global Ecology and Conservation, and Landscape and Urban Planning. Currently, Dr. Awoyemi works at the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, IITA, as manager of the IITA Forest Center, Ibadan, Nigeria, where he has Dr. Awoyemi, he has successfully led and managed several conservation projects, securing over $1.3 million in grants. That's a lot of money. Some notable achievements include the accreditation of the IETA Tree Heritage Park as the first in Nigeria and 11th in Africa. Also, designation of the Emerald Forest Reserve as a key biodiversity area in Nigeria, and publishing papers on conservation impacts. Consequently, Dr. Awoyemi was recognized as one of the Africa's top 100 young African conservation leaders. Congratulations. In the first ever African award. Awoyemi is a member of the Society for Conservation Biology, which is SCB, and the NSCB is the local chapter of the global SCB. He's also a member of the British Ornithologist Union, BOU, and West African Ornithological Society. Through his work, Awoyemi promotes sustainable ecosystem restoration and biodiversity conservation in Africa, and of course, citizen science, which I add to that. Congratulations, Dr. Awoyemi, and we welcome you today to this webinar, and we look forward to learning from your research. The floor is yours.
Yeah, good afternoon, Dr. Ringim. Good afternoon, everyone. I would start by appreciating the executives of SCB Nigerian chapter for inviting me for this presentation. Thank you very much. Without wasting much of our time, can you permit me to share my screen, or you want to share from your side?
No, I think you can share it. Yeah, just go ahead and share it. Try to share it.
By saying host disabled participants
All right.
screen
All right.
share.
Just a minute. Just a minute. Okay. Try sharing it now.
Okay, this one, I think.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So the title of the talk is Status of Urban Ecology in Africa. Like he said, like Dr. Ringim said, this is a part of my research, which has been published in Landscape and Urban Planning. It's the first chapter of my PhD thesis, where we performed a systematic literature review to actually decouple the state of urban ecology in the entire African continent. Just a brief introduction into the global urban expansion. Based on this chart, in the 1980s, only about 40% of the global human population lived in urban areas. By 2015, that figure increased to over 50%. And this projection also by the United Nations puts it that by 2050, almost 70% of the global human population will live in urban centers. But then the urban expansion is not homogeneous. For instance, there's a difference between the global south and the global north. The global south are typically categorized as developed countries in Europe, in North America, Australia. compared to the global south, which is largely concentrated in Africa and Asia. So in developing countries of the global south, urban expansion is even rapid compared to the global north. And based on this chart, it shows that the concentration of urban expansion is in low income countries, most of them in Asia and Africa, as I said before. And then if we look at it at the continental level, we'll see that majority or the global urban expansion is concentrated in the sub-Saharan Africa. Even the rate of urban expansion in Africa is higher than the world average. Because this talk is about Nigeria, or this society is the Nigerian chapter of the Society for Conservation Biology. So I put some figures here about urban expansion in Nigeria. Based on the prediction of the United Nations, 90% of urbanization until 2050 will take place in Africa and Asia. And this will concentrate in India, China, and Nigeria. So Nigeria is a global player in the global urban expansion. So urban expansion will be serious in India, China, and Nigeria by 2050, based on projection by the United Nations, having cities like Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt, Kano, and Ibadan. And here are some key facts about urbanization in Nigeria. Also, according to the World Bank, 5 of the 30 largest urban settlements in the African continent are concentrated in Nigeria. And I mentioned a few of them, Lagos, Ibadan, Port Harcourt, Kano. About 4% is the actual annual urban growth rate. So the annual urban growth rate in Nigeria will be about 4%. And by 2037, the urban population will have doubled in Nigeria. So about 20% is the annual increase in housing demand for Lagos, Ibadan, and Kano. So about 700,000 housing units must be built every year to keep up with the growing urban population. And we know we urban ecologists or conservationists know what that implies on nature. And to put that into proper perspective, I've put these photos here comparing what a non-urban habitat looks like. And if we keep converting the natural habitat to urban center, this is what we will have. You see, there's a sharp contrast between the city center and the non-urban area. Why is this important? Studies have shown that urbanization exerts negative impact on the social ecological system. For instance, the urban environment is dominated by vehicles, concrete, built services. We have the social system, the people living, the ecosystem, the biodiversity. And studies have shown that there is an interdependence between this socio-ecological system, the urban environment, the social system, and the ecosystem, So urbanization exerts negative impact on biodiversity, on regulating ecosystem services, and even how we interact with nature. Based on that, we will expect that, if you remember, I talked about Africa being Africa and Asia being the region of the global south that will concentrate the urbanization surge in the coming years. We will have expected that urban ecology research effort will also be conducted more in Africa or Asia, but that is not the case. According to this recent study, investigating the top 20 countries' population on urban ecology shows that the majority of the countries' population more on urban ecology are even concentrated in the global north, which is not even experiencing the urban explosion that Africa or Asia is experiencing. On this chart, you see that only South Africa is an African country that is represented here. So this tells us that Africa is understudied and we know little about urban ecology in Africa. To contribute to knowledge in terms of urban ecology in Africa, to understand the status of urban ecology in Africa, we performed this systematic literature review. And then the specific objectives were to determine the current status of research efforts on urban ecology in the last 100 years. And then to identify research gaps in terms of geography, where studies concentrated in terms of ecoregion, which taxonomic groups are being studied more than others, what ecological studies, scientific fields are more studied than others, which ones are not are understudied and need more attention. Then also to investigate factors that influence research efforts, such as, for instance, we predicted that areas experiencing high current urban expansion or even future urban expansion, areas with high human population density and increased in GDP, economic weight measured by GDP, will concentrate high research effort, will be more studied. And also in terms of ecoregion, we hypothesize that bigger ecoregions and those ones that are categorized as threatened will be more studied. To answer these objectives, we performed literature search in three databases, the Web of Science, Google Scholar, and Scopus in March 2021. And that yielded over 60,000 papers. So we followed the PRISMA statement, which is a standard for conducting systematic literature review. And we screened the papers that we downloaded using Ryan. Ryan is a web-based app that uses semi-automation system to screen paper preliminary pages. So following the PRISMA statement, we ended up with almost 800 papers published in Africa in the last 100 years. Then we collected additional data on urbanization intensity. There is this website called African Police, which is a database documenting urban expansion in Africa. We also we collected coordinates of the study sites where the 800 papers were conducted on Google Earth so that we could overlap the study sites with urbanization intensity in Africa. We also collected additional information on the sizes and conservation status of ecoregions from WWF. We collected socio-ecological economic parameters from the United Nations, like population density, GDP of each studied country. Then for taxonomic studies, we collected information on the kingdom and classes of the studied biodiversity in African urban ecology in the last 100 years. For our analysis, we categorize the papers based on year of publication, when was the paper published in the last 100 years, so that we could predict if urban ecological research effort is increasing or decreasing, just to look at the trends in Africa. Which country the country of study where the study was conducted, the scientific focus is the study focusing on population ecology or community ecology or landscape ecology or even wildlife disease, applied field. We categorize each paper. We also categorize them based on the scale of study. For instance, if a particular paper was conducted within a single African city or conducted within at least two African country in two cities within a country. For instance, a study conducted in Abuja and Lagos will be categorized as local study. Is it a regional study if it comprises more than one African country? For instance, a study conducted in Lagos and another one in Cape Town, another one in Accra in Ghana. So such studies were categorized as regional studies. And then we refer to it as global study if it included other continents outside of Africa. Just to look at the interdisciplinary transnational research collaboration among ecologists in this continent. And based on our analysis, research showed that urban ecology research efforts started in Africa in the late 1970s, which is around the same time that this discipline started in other continents, other regions of the world. And the first urban ecology paper was actually from Nigeria, which is this Opala study in 1978, looking at saying that urban ecology findings from the global north, from America, for instance, or from Europe, cannot be used for management purposes in the global south, for instance, in Nigeria. An argument that is still valid up to date, and also reinforcing the need for more urban ecology studies in Africa. So, urban ecology research efforts started increasing in Africa, culminating at about 130 papers in 2020, which is encouraging. This is encouraging. At least we know that there's a positive progression, more researchers, more collaborations leading to more papers in Africa, from all about 10 papers, 1 to 10 papers to almost 130. That is fine. That's 130 papers published on urban ecology in Africa in year 2020. But then if we compare what has been published in the entire African continent to what a single country from the global north is population, we'll know that Africa is understudied. So just 800 papers from the entire African continent in the last 100 years compared to a single country in Europe, such as Spain, Germany, Australia. You can't even compare it to what has been published in China or USA. So our study shows that African urban ecology is understudied. There's need for more papers. There's need for more training. There's need for greater collaboration. And surprisingly, we found out 4 out of 10 papers published were from South Africa. So most of the papers, 40% of the papers published in Africa were from South Africa. And this is quite surprising, given that areas in the Afrotropical region, for instance, Nigeria and Congo, Kenya, are the countries experiencing the greatest urban expansion in Africa. So we'll have expected more studies from this region, which is not the case. Rather, areas that are not even as urbanized, for instance, South Africa, is where we are having most of the studies. Then if we consider the scale of studies, our findings show that majority of the papers are city-based. Over 50% of the studies on urban ecology in Africa in the last 100 years were conducted within a single city. So it implies that, for instance, I'm an urban ecologist based in Ibadan. So I'm just collecting data on Ibadan and just publishing such papers. Also telling us that there's lack of research collaboration among African urban ecologists. Now I have Dr. Ringim in Kano, I have Dr. Iwajomo in Lagos. So we could collaborate. For instance, if I have my hypothesis or research objectives, I could share it with these urban ecologists in Kano and Lagos. Even why not regional study also in Accra, people based in Cape Town in South Africa. So like I said earlier, majority of the publication, 40%, were from Southern Africa compared to areas concentrating the high urban expansion, which is around the Afrotropical belt. This area is around the equator, and urban expansion is concentrated here. But then this area is understudied compared to areas that are not as urbanized. But then we found a surprising or not surprising result that GDP is positively correlated with number of urban ecological studies conducted in Africa. For instance, richer countries in Africa published more on urban ecology in the last century compared to poorer African countries, which makes sense given the economic restriction that this region faces. In addition, we found out this is also a regular occurrence among ecologists or researchers, focusing on threatened ecoregions, focusing on threatened biodiversity. We want to study Ibadan Malembe, which is endemic, is critically endangered, which is fine. But then the relatively stable or intact ecoregions or biodiversity could be facing threats that could have been detected through our research. So we detected that most of the studies by urban ecologists in Africa focused on threatened ecoregions, threatened biodiversity, then leaving those that are, so to speak, relatively stable. We also focus more on larger ecoregions compared to the ones that are smaller in Africa. We detected that research efforts on urban ecology in Africa also focused on conservation issues. We know this for sure that conservation issues are prominent in Africa. They are very high on agenda. And that's why majority of the studies on urban ecology focused on conservation issues, human dimension, how people relate with nature, especially with the advent of citizen science initiatives. Some focusing on population ecology, but mechanistic studies that requires experiment like animal behavior, landscape ecology requiring the use of machine learning algorithm are relatively understudied, as well as studies involving lab work, lab analysis like looking at wildlife diseases, viruses, wildlife management are relatively understudied, also calling for additional scientific attention. This is a surprising figure, given that looking at the kingdoms of the studied biodiversity in Africa, majority of the studies, almost 320 of them, are focused on animals, the group animals, maybe due to their body size, due to their charismatic nature, or just based on the available expertise. Majority of the studies focus on animals, followed by plants. Now, if we look at microorganisms like chromista, bacteria, protozoa, we just had only 1 or 2, 3, 4 papers focusing on those aspects. Also calling our attention to these understudied kingdoms in African urban ecology. When we zoomed in on the studied TASA within the most studied groups, the most studied kingdoms, which is animal and plants, we detected that the classes Aves, comprising of birds, mammals, and insects, were the most studied in African urban ecology in the last 100 years. So we know little about other classes spread across the remaining kingdoms, about 7 of them that were discovered. Again, flowering plants, dicot, monocot, and then pines were the most studied classes among the kingdom plants. So what are the key take-home messages from this study? The first one is that Africa is urbanizing at an unprecedented rate, but urban ecology is understudied in this region. There are important geographic, ecological, and scientific biases. Like I said earlier, in terms of geography, areas that are concentrating high urban expansion are relatively understudied compared to regions that are even urbanizing at unprecedented rates. In terms of ecology, we are focused more on threatened and bigger ecoregions. So we know little about relatively stable ecoregions and biodiversity. We have also shown that there is scientific biases. For instance, we know more about conservation issues in Africa, but we don't know more, we know little about applied mechanistic field like studies of animal behaviors, lab work, looking at wildlife diseases, detecting microorganisms. We know little about that in Africa. Urban ecology is significantly more studied in wealthier African countries. Rich countries are relatively more studied in Africa, which is not surprising because with a better economy, you could invest more on research, on education, thereby improving the state of knowledge in that particular field, of which urban ecology as a discipline will also benefit from this. Surprisingly, more urbanized areas in the Afrotropical region, areas around the equator, are not more studied. They are not the main focus of study, whether now or in the future, because we projected urban expansion up to 2030 to see whether current or future urbanization intensity will influence research efforts. So We have more studies also coming from South Africa. But then the implication of this is that there will be probably local extirpation or local extinction of some species due to urbanization in areas concentrating high urban expansion. And conclusively, we need to redirect our priorities regarding urban ecology in Africa. We need to look at understudied scientific fields, understudied TASA, understudied regions in terms of continents, in terms of country, and also in terms of ecoregion. The species that we think are relatively stable, least concerned, we need to look at them also, not only those that are categorized as threatened on the IUCN that will attract, so to speak, funding. Thank you all for listening.
Wow, that's awesome presentation, Dr. Awoyemi, and thank you for that wonderful presentation. Time for questions and answers. Please, if you have any question, you can indicate, raising up your hand, or you can just unmute and speak, ask your question, or you can post on the chat box. Dr. Abidemi, over to you. Please handle the question and answer session.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rengi. Thank you so much, Dr. Awoyemi, for this great and timely presentation. We do have question, and I also want to use this time to wish us happy World Biodiversity Day, right? But today is World Biodiversity Day, so happy World Biodiversity Day, and thank you for presenting such important and useful topic of discussion in this today, which we really need at this time. Do you have any question? I have a question and contribution. Okay. Mr. Ifeanyi, please go ahead before I ask my question and contribution.
Okay. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. It's quite inspiring that such gap in knowledge is being unveiled. My question goes this way. What plans or what actions do you have in place, or are you planning to put in place as regards decline or reduce research in urban ecology as regards African society in general?
Okay.
Or Nigeria in particular?
Okay, can I go ahead to answer that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, like I said, it's obvious that there's lack of collaboration in terms of African urban ecology. One of the main things I will start with is improving collaboration. For instance, I already told Dr. Ringim that part of what we investigated in the southern part of the country could also be replicated in the northern part. And now, not only in the northern part, but also incorporating other African countries and the rest of them. This is one aspect that we could use to improve that. Other aspect could be also to encourage researchers, for instance, to join other global bodies. For instance, the Society for Urban Ecology, SURE, they call it SURE, which is also a platform for engaging with like minds in terms of improving knowledge. Yeah, I think these are within my reach. Other ones will be in terms of advocacy and also awareness creation. For instance, engaging with policy makers to at least invest more on education so that scientific disciplines such as urban ecology will also benefit from this endeavor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Awoyemi.
Yeah.
Mr. Ifeanyi, are you okay with the answer? Do you have a follow-up question?
No, I don't have a show. I am okay with it. It's quite
Yeah.
an impressive movement and effort in particular.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
I,
Dr.
I,
Ringim. Okay,
okay.
please go ahead.
Can I to go ahead.
Yes, please.
Because I know Dr. Ningen is an active member as regards urban ecology awareness, as much as I know. I think we have to also venture into his approach and encourage more people, more
Mhm.
persons to get them involved in conservation, because conservation work, as I can see it from this part of the world, or from the southern part of the world, south part of the world, there are specific individuals that are interested, but we need to create more awareness to make it more appealing to people.
Mm.
Yeah, I know that it's quite challenging, but we can do something.
Mm.
Yeah.
That is valid. That is
Yeah.
valid, absolutely. Dr. Ringim, can you please?
Yeah, just anyway, it's not like a question, but I just wanted to hear about Dr. Awemi's opinion. We know urbanization is a big problem for Nigeria, as with other countries that are experiencing high population growth, like Tanzania and other countries in Africa. So, are there like strategies, or what kind of strategies are in place from the government part? What planning are these governments doing to address the level of urbanization in these countries? What kind of strategies are they adopting or is currently in place?
In terms of government, I can't say much.
Mm,
I think, but then I think it's far below expectation what is being done. For instance, in that paper, we compared with something that is called R&D, research and development. It's a funding that is dedicated to research, for scientific research. And if you see what the African countries have dedicated to this, is far, far, far below what has been uh, given by other countries in the global north. So what we can do is, I mean, we keep raising the awareness on why the government needs to do this. And one way of doing it will not be to speak the grammar as ecologists, but then to actually quantify this in economic terms. For instance, we are talking about wildlife diseases. That is an understudied scientific field in terms of urban ecology in Africa. You know, for instance, having dogs, stray dogs in cities is very prominent in African cities. And then we know that these dogs are now turning to more or less like mammalian scavengers. They pick on carrions, dead and decaying organisms in cities, and this is a potential for them to spread rabies. Now, looking at this connectivity, uh, this work would have been done if we had vultures in our cities, but we know we don't have vultures again. So the dogs clean it up, and because there is abundant food, then the population of the dogs will also increase, and the potential to even bite people will also increase. Then rabies will also increase, and government will spend millions on immunization against rabies. Why not just support research, biodiversity conservation, where vultures will do this work for you voluntarily? You know,
Mm.
this kind of thinking could actually help the policymakers to see the impact of what we are saying, rather than saying, no, you are doing urbanization, this, and that. They know it better than us, how to counter us. But if we quantify what we are saying in economic terms, I believe the government will see reasons for change. And this
Mm.
is evident with the citizen science approach in Nigeria now, especially through the Nigerian Bird Atlas project. You know,
Mm.
this is being replicated in other African countries, and
Mm.
governments of these countries are hearing about it. Citizen science, they know that it's not only the scientists, but then the citizens are now incorporated, and they know that this is a topical issue that needs to be solved. So, I mean, these different approaches could actually help.
Mm. Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that idea of not just talking the talk, but what the government really want to hear is how will this help to cut cost, monetary value. So presenting conservation to the government in terms of monetary value could be a very good approach. I love that. Thank you. I'm just curious. Your slide, I think, is it 22? I don't know. That slide that shows the topical research outputs. And yeah, I'm just curious to see that wildlife, no, the other one. Yes, human-wildlife conflict is understudied in Africa. I'm really curious because I would assume that a lot of people do research on human-wildlife conflict, especially in places that have national research park like Kenya, South Africa, even Ghana. When it comes to lion and others, and elephant, I would assume that people do a lot of research on human wildlife conflict. So seeing that it has least research outputs, I'm just curious to know why, if you know. And the other one, I'm also curious to know if your data, if those research paper if you look at the local paper too, like journals that are from local paper, not globally known publications, maybe in, most of researchers in Nigeria published in local journals. So do you consider local journals in your research?
Yeah, this is an issue. I think probably you are talking about uh, papers that are not indexed in this
Mm-hmm.
big
Mm-hmm.
platforms like Scopus, Web
Mm-hmm.
of Science, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a big issue in Africa, and also grey literature. Perhaps most of what we are referring to as research, maybe
Mm-hmm.
in Ghana or on wildlife conflict or all these areas, could are they actually published? One, where are they published? Are they discoverable? Because it's possible that we missed some of those papers anyway.
Mm.
But then if they were discoverable, the database will have picked them.
Mm.
Uh, the reviewers also raised this issue, and then we incorporated Google Scholar as well. So at least a paper should be found in Google Scholar. But then some of these papers in Africa,
Mm.
some are even not online, or they are not detected by the search engines, which is an issue. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely it's possible. But then one of the first step to discussing at this stage, uh, even for donors like landscape and urban planning, is that they want you to consider papers that have been peer reviewed and
Mm-hmm.
deposited in standard databases.
Mm-hmm.
Some will not even allow you to use Google Scholar. They will say it's either deposited in Scopus or Web of Science. So if the paper uh, doesn't merit that, then you will not include it in the publication.
Yeah.
Which is actually the case with one paper that we just published in Trends in Ecology and Evolution, which is a very big journal.
Mm-hmm.
We were asked to only focus on recent papers in the last 5-10 years, and also deposited in this global basis, because they believe that before a paper could be published and a journal index in this journal, it must be reputable.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's interesting. Thank you. I would assume that is why we don't have a lot of paper publications from Africa, because I remembered going for a conference during my PhD, and one of the presenter actually said something very funny, and what he said is, "There's not a lot of bird research in Africa." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And that we don't have people studying birds in Africa. And I remembered, coming from Aplori, I was like, are you joking? And Elizabeth, which is the African Leadership Conservation Director, then was in the conference, and she stood up and she like, we have places like IIT in Nigeria, we have places like Aplori, and we were able to like debunk what he said. But he is saying that because the publications or the outputs from what we are doing back in Africa are not visible globally. So I agree with you. I agree with you that that would be the reason. But I read a paper yesterday, or maybe a blog yesterday, and this blog was arguing that a lot of things are being done in the global south that are not recognized because they are locally published. And the blog was arguing that in research now, reviewers should consider authors bringing in research that are locally published, because why we are publishing is to add to the knowledge, to the body of knowledge, So when we remove those locally published research, for example, some people are publishing in local papers because they don't have the knowledge that they could ask for, maybe free publication access, or they don't even have money to publish in those open access journals, and that makes them to publish in local research, in local papers or local journals. So if we remove those from being reviewed in our publication, then it will not add to the body of knowledge, So I was reading that blog yesterday and I was like, interesting. But I also want to just contribute to what you have said about urban ecology, because it's an area that I'm also interested in and I've been doing for the past, I think, since my PhD. Thank you for referencing one of your papers. From my PhD till now is what I've been doing. One thing I realized last 2 years, because I was working on urban ecology and I was looking at research done globally in when it comes to urban ecology. And I realized that most of these urban ecology studies are not even done in urban areas, especially when it comes to Africa. Even in the global north, they are done in urban green space. So what a lot of papers or what a lot of authors do when they go to the field is to go and conduct research in urban green space, like parks, like gardens, and they refer those places to urban areas, and it does not really holistically show what urban area is. We cannot conclude on those findings to say that, this is what is happening in urban areas, because it is done in urban green space. So the argument for me is, beyond doing things in urban green space in urban area, we could also do things in core urban area like Ibadan city that you showed us the overview. You realize that we don't even have a lot of green spaces there. And I'm certain that there are birds there, or talking as an ornithologist now, or there are other animals and plants there. So it's okay to also look at those places and see what kind of biodiversity do we have there and how are they thriving. So it's an area that presently I'm looking at, and just putting it out there that as an urban ecologist, we should also be looking at it. Another thing is, thank you for mentioning the citizen scientists. We know that a lot of data have been collected. For example, Dr. Ringim have done a lot of citizen science work in both urban areas and rural areas. But most of these urban ecology studies through citizen scientists are also done in green spaces. And I was discussing with somebody, I think last year, in one open conference webinar, and he was like, oh yeah, I can't just go to the mall now and say that I want to go and study birds. Why? Because people feel like, what would be in the mall? Doves and pigeon. But it will interest you that you can go to a mall, an area that looks like a mall and very populated, and you find cool species there. But we ignore those places. And seeing that urbanization has come to stay, like people will keep on going to urban areas, people will keep on building house. It is now eminent that we'll start looking at those areas so that we could study and make sure that people are thriving with the animals or the biodiversity in the city. I just want to bring that out. And the word collaboration is very big, which within Africa and within Global South, and collaborating with the northern friends are very eminent. It's something we should look into if really we want to conserve biodiversity at large. Thank you so much for this discussion again. We hope to see you again in our webinars as a guest and also as a participant, because we need to discuss more of this in Nigeria and other in the global space. Thank you. Do you
Thank you
have any
very
other
much.
question?
I don't think there is any other question, unless if anyone has a question. We
Or
have,
a contribution or a thought?
yeah.
Or you want to collaborate, you have ideas and you want to tell Dr. Awoyemi that Dr. Awoyemi, oh, this is a topic I'm working on. I want to collaborate with you.
Yes, that's really welcome.
Yeah.
And I remember when you mentioned that if you tell someone that you are going to look for birds in malls or something like that, it's very possible you find a very cool species. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking from ecological point of view and speaking from urban ecology, uh, species were categorized into three main categories. We have species that are urban avoiders, those species that avoid urban environment. Then we have urban adapters.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how the level of urbanization is, there are some species that will adapt to the urban environment. Then
Mm-hmm.
we have urban exploiters. There are
Mm-hmm.
species that exploit the urban environment at some point of their life cycle. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they come and go. So that's how species are categorized into two, depending on the urban environment. And it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
very cool thing to study to see how this biodiversity or this wildlife continue to adapt to an ever-changing environment, no matter how humans try to change the pace of the natural environment. It's very interesting and it's very fascinating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
Uh,
We
Professor
also want to
Ola
recognize,
Babalola is,
yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to recognize. That
yeah.
we have Professor Babalola. Yeah, we want to recognize your presence. I want to recognize other people's presence, so, Professor Detola and many other people that I don't know, Professor Jeremy and everyone. We want to recognize your presence here. Uh, Professor Babalola, you are muted. You are unmuted. You want to say something?
Good evening, everybody. I'm so
Hmm.
glad seeing you all today. The issue is where I am presently. I'm very busy. I've been moving up and down, and I did not really focus too much, but I listened to quite some of the messages that have been passed today. I'm so glad we have somebody who's working on urban ecology. This is one of the areas that I'm trying to go into now because most of the time we normally talk about rural forests. We normally talk about forests in the rural area, in the jungle. People are fast losing focus on trees and forests in urban areas. And this is an area where we need to at least channel energy. Urban heat is killing a number of people around the world. And climate change is not a joke when you are talking about the cities and our urban area. So that is one of the reasons why I've decided to be planting trees in schools and in our cities. So good effort to you, Doc. Thank you so much for what you have done. And to everybody on the platform, I appreciate you all. Thank you very much for the good work you are doing. Currently, I'm now in the African Forest Forum in Nairobi, where I'm carrying out some research with some other researchers in Africa, and where we want to do more work in urban area. I'll look forward to area we can collaborate in order to make Africa great again. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Thank
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 you.
you
you
very
so much.
much, Prof.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, I think we need to adjourn this meeting now. If there's no any other question or there's no any other question or contribution, and we can always reach out to Dr. Awoyemi. Dr. Awoyemi, expect me in your DM.
No problem.
Okay, we can always reach
Yeah,
out to Dr.
yeah.
Awoyemi
Some way
and
forward, yeah, for sure. I mean,
going forward. If you have any question or contribution or thoughts for collaboration. All right, Dr. Ringim, Dr. Joy, thank you for joining also the financial secretary. So Dr. Ringim, is there any other thing?
no, I don't think if there is any other.
All right.
So,
Okay, thank you. See you in the next.